I was not the brightest at school at all, distracted by rugby and cricket and football and lots of other sports. I was a fully qualified pilot at 17 years of age, and that's all I wanted to do. I was about to sign a 16-year contract. He said, well, I sit in these meetings with lots of people. They've got a little sort of flash car parked outside, and they're as thick as you are. I'm sure you'll be able to get that career. And to do that, you have to do estate management. The key success in my career is to surround myself with people that have either intelligence that I haven't got or strategic ability in certain areas. And during the pandemic, accelerated in retail, what was going to happen naturally in 7 to 10 years happened in 7 months.
What was the biggest risk you have taken?
Most of the risks that I took, most of them, were a disaster, but I learned from them all.
Hi everyone, welcome to Business of Building. My name is Gary Talati Lam and I'm your host for today. Please welcome Scott Murdoch for our chat. Scott is the chairman of UK Retail at CBRE and was the founder and managing partner at CWM prior to the merger of the two businesses in March 2022. Scott brings vast experience and considerable expertise from commercial property industry, where he currently represents a number of landlords and clients, including Battersea Power Station, AEG, Olayan, British Land, and Nuveen. Scott also represents retail clients like Hugo Boss, UGG, and Summers, All Saints, Gant, Lacoste, to name the few. Scott is also currently and has been a shareholder and director for a number of retail and restaurant and leisure related companies, which include Boxpark, which has been recently sold to LDC, Bonnie and Wild, Cromwell Place, and Melrose Morgan. And in the recent years, he has sat on board for a number of children's charities, including Variety and Action for Children, and trustee for Childhood First. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Scott Murdoch to Business of Building. Thank you for joining us, Scott, and I'm very, very excited to be speaking to you. Although we know each other for a very long time, this is a different setting, isn't it, to have a chat?
A very different setting, and how the world has changed, Gary, since we met each other all those years ago. Now we're in such a technical sort of environment where I'm actually in a Zoom room in my office dedicated to just to this sort of mode of communication. It's quite a changed world.
It is. And, you know, if we were to think about it just 2 years ago, specifically in our industry, it's quite a movement. So I guess the first question, Scott, for us to move on would be, how did you end up in the world of commercial real estate, and with such an expertise and decades of experience now behind you? How was the starting point? What is the life story here?
Well, the life story is not quite what you would imagine, Gary, and not quite nearly as exciting as you might think. It all started off because I was not the brightest at school at all. I was quite sporty, but not the brightest, and didn't do particularly well in my sort of A-level exams. I was distracted by rugby and cricket and football and lots of other sports, and as a consequence, it didn't really worry me too much because I only had one love in life at that time, apart from sport, and that was to be a pilot. So I wanted to be an RAF pilot, and I'd passed my gliding exam, and I was a qualified glider pilot at 16 years of age. And because my birthday falls in the summer in July, I actually trained to be a pilot on proper aircraft and fixed wing aircraft when I was 16 years of age. And then I passed my test, my flying test, my GFT, on the day after my birthday, on the 14th of July. So I was a fully qualified pilot at 17 years of age in one day. And that's all I wanted to do. And then having done that flying scholarship to get into the RAF, just as I was about to sign a 16-year contract, which it was at the time, 16-year service minimum, my father, who was and is still alive, an engineer, he hasn't retired, even though he's in his mid-80s, he's not retired yet. He said to me, son, are you doing the right thing? Are you definitely convinced you want to give 16 years of your life away to the Air Force and to the armed forces? Do you not want to get a degree under your belt, first of all, before you decide to go into the Royal Air Force? And I said, Dad, that's a great idea, but you may not have spotted that I'm not the brightest. I'm thick as two short planks. And what degree would I be able to get into? And he said, well, I as an engineer, I sit in these meetings with lots of people, developers and quantity surveyors and construction people. And I also sit in these meetings with guys in the corner of the room called chartered surveyors. And they've got all the chat, just like you. They've got a little sort of flash car parked outside, and they're as thick as you are. So I'm sure you'll be able to get that sort of that career. And to do that, you have to do estate management or land economy university. But all the rugby players that you know well all got into property whilst playing rugby, because it was amateur sport in those days. Why don't you follow that route? So lo and behold, my father's advice, I looked down the UCA forms at the time to see what the lowest entry qualification was to any university or college, and it happened to be South Bank Poly was the lowest. Even though I lived in Scotland in those days, South Bank Poly in London was the lowest entry level, and I managed to scrape into to property completely by default, with the intention of just going to college for 3 years, getting my degree, and then rejoining the RAF. That was the plan. There was no intention to do real estate as a career. And of course, the rest is history. I ended up going to do the degree and realizing that probably a 16-year service commission in the Air Force wasn't for me. I was rather seduced by London life, seduced by real estate, and got into property via that back door.
It's fantastic. One thing I didn't know was RAF, Scott, because I gave exams in India for IAF and I passed them, and I was due to go as well. For me, it wasn't quite 16 years, it was 5 years. It was called the Short Service Commission at the time. And in my case, it was my mum who was like, is this something what you really, really want to do? And this was before I came to London for my master's. So this is something I didn't know about you, and we have in common, which is quite interesting.
Are you still a passionate flyer now?
No, I've not kept up with that, unfortunately, with everything else which is going on. But it's quite interesting because there are so many tests, and one of the things was even measuring the length of your legs, the sitting height, and because you have to fit into the cockpit, as it were. So yeah, at least I know the process. But one thing though, which strikes me, is you have been very interested in team sports. I guess that's one of the things probably which comes back into what you have done in the industry as well, is team building, isn't it? Because that has probably helped you shape that that part. How important has it been for you when you built your business and now in CBRE as well?
Very much so. It's a very interesting sort of observation, that, because it's 100% true. I would even go back to my school days, Gary, where I was a reasonable sportsman, but I was probably quite good at a lot of sports rather than being brilliant at any particular one. And so as a consequence, I was driven towards the team sports more than the individual sports. Even though I love tennis and even though I love golf, I was definitely more attracted to team sports. And quite often, especially in my rugby career, I would play for a slightly lower level club as captain rather than being in the best team as an also ran. So it was subconscious. I didn't really intend to. I didn't think at the time that I wanted to be this sort of leader, but I just enjoyed the captaincy and the camaraderie and responsibility in rugby and in football and in cricket in particular. I was captain of many teams in cricket over the years. And I think that was probably what started off my desire to form one day my own business and try and be a captain of or a CEO of a company. It was subconscious at the time. I can't say that I definitely set out to do so. I had really, as you heard from my story about the property, I fell into it really rather than any deliberate plan. But I think many people that have been with me on the journey for all these years since feel that I always had the intention of being a CEO one day. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but I certainly like the idea of being a sort of captain or in charge of a team.
So you always follow strategies? Do you think a lot about strategies, or is this something which comes naturally to you depending on what the situation is, or do you think about this might work, I need to try this, or read books to follow some strategies?
No, I think the only success that I would say that the key success, Gary, in my career is to surround myself with people that have either intelligence that I haven't got, or strategic ability in certain areas, or in great EQ. So I think I'm quite good at spotting. I'm pretty good at sort of spotting opportunity, business-wise, transaction, business investments that might lead to profitability, to try and implement the strategy to achieve that final goal. I'm very acutely aware I need a team around me. And I've been very blessed most of my business life to have a lady called Shirin El Ganyan. She's been with me for 25 years. She turned 60 just a few months ago, she wouldn't mind me saying. And she was everything that I wasn't. So we met each other through her husband, actually, she's godmother to my eldest boy, and her husband is godfather to my youngest daughter. And they're very close family friends, super successful Iranian family, came over in '79 from the revolution, and she's unbelievable at EQ, fantastic emotional intelligence, really knows how to deal with people. She's beautiful inside and out. And she was a great person. Many people would say that Scott would be the man at the forefront trying to sort of do all these transactions, and she would always be sweeping up the debris that I left behind. That's a little bit unfair, I think, but certainly we were a great sort of balancing act. So I think, if I'm being honest, Gary, to summarize, I would say strategically I was good at finding people that I could work alongside and who complemented my skill set in that management team. I could never, ever do it on my own.
You bring out a very important point, which I always observe in leadership. And probably that kind of leads into a very nice question, because which is very interesting for me, is what does leadership look like for you in today's world?
So today, for example, I this morning, for 2.5 hours this morning, Gary, you will find this also hard to believe, but it's 100% true. I'm obsessed by the metaverse, for example. And I think the future of so much of what we do in real estate, particularly in retail, will involve, and I have an Oculus Quest 2 headset at home and have done for 5 years. And I've been very into that whole metaverse sort of world, creating my own avatar and going into sort of a retail world. And the reason why I mentioned that example is that even though I'm an older man, I surround myself with younger, talented people that can teach me. So there's no ageism with me, there's no sexism with me. I've had more women in my office than men consistently, because they're fundamentally more able and capable in retail than men are. But I think
I don't disagree.
and I really believe that genuinely. And Sharon, if she was here, she would definitely support that. I think what leadership is about is trying to empower talent of all age groups. The best recruit that I have ever secured, I think, in my subordinate recruit rather than a partner, I would say, would be a guy called Steve Ardron that I recruited during the pandemic 2.5 years ago. Now he is in his mid-60s. So this is not an ageism for recruiting and employing young people. It's also, this guy was about to retire. I said, you have 30 years at Debenhams, and before that at Next for 15 years, an amazing career. I said, come and help us. And he's so, the workaholic, the work ethic, the intelligence that he has, the knowledge of the industry has been fantastic. So I just think what leadership today for me looks like is you've got to find, and here's my first of many during this podcast, I would suggest, Gary, references to sporting analogies. So for me, it all comes down to football in business life. And the important thing in leadership is to find that team, to find the best possible sort of midfield players, to find the best possible defenders, the best possible goalkeeper, and of course your superstar, as I call them, the rock star strikers that are going to do the business for you up front, but they may not be able to implement the business. They'll find you the business, they'll do the deals, but they might not be able to then run the business thereafter. So it's important, I think, in leadership to be able to select, as a manager, the best possible football team in any given circumstance, and that maybe is what I've done reasonably successfully over the years.
It's fantastic, and also empathy, probably, isn't it? Because you reference to EQ with your partner as well, which is quite an important characteristic of seeing to relate, especially when we have all come out of COVID in the last 2 years, where people are still finding their feet, having the confidence to come back to work, taking the tubes. Do you find the same as well?
Yeah, I think EQ/mental health, I think, is something that is very, very it's something that we didn't talk about. Let's face it, if we had a podcast existed 10 years ago, it's pretty unlikely that you and I would have covered EQ and mental health in that discussion. The world has changed so enormously, and I think clearly what happened during the pandemic accelerated in retail what was going to happen naturally in 10 years, or in a period of time, 7 to 10 years, happened in 7 months. In my opinion, in terms of the transformation of retail. But also we learned other skills during that time. Apart from this wonderful Zoom call that we're on right now, we learned the EQ and the mental health became a lot more acute. We were all suffering, and we all saw in our children the fact that they were not getting their education day to day, how they were affected by that. We saw it in our relationships with our husbands and our wives, with our fathers and our mothers and our brothers and our sisters. Everything changed, and it made us, I think, more acutely aware of how to deal with conflicting personalities and people that were suffering during that time. And I think that's made us all very, very different since we came back to the office. We're all, I'm hoping, it's a permanent change, a lot more understanding of each other and a lot more sympathetic towards each other than we were. I can really see that having changed, and I just hope it's not a sort of passing fad and that we revert back to how we were. I'm sure we won't.
I guess, it's definitely also increased the momentum of change, isn't it? As you said, hopefully it's a change to stay rather than being a trend for a little bit. I don't think so, because you can see it in people. The sensitivity for other people has changed, I think, when people come to work, or how are you feeling, or just reaching out over a Zoom call and seeing how people are doing, which is quite nice to see.
It's also true, Gary. Sorry, just to interrupt you. Sorry, forgive me. But I since I will come on to CBRE no doubt in a minute. But I've noticed since I've been here in the last few months how they have the seminars and the events that they have here, including 2 events just yesterday, cover subjects that are sensitive subjects that would never have been discussed in a pre-pandemic world. The very first discussion I had, first seminar I went to here was a multi-faith event here, which used to be called because I'm married into the Jewish world, it used to be called the Jewish Forum, and they've now renamed that, as they should do, and obviously in a recent world too, the Faith Forum. So we had a variety of Muslims, we had a variety of Jewish people there, we had Sikhs, we had all sorts of denominations, and but all discussing and collaborating in my first meeting here about mental health and how it was affecting them at home from the point of view of family and religion. And I think things have really, people would never have attended that seminar before or participated in the way that they are now, in such a sort of an overtly interactive way as they are now. It's incredible how the world is changing and how quickly it's changing for the better.
I feel like it has made us open a bit more to different way of living. I mean, just coming back to the construction industry, having a Zoom call, for example, with your client would be a bit of, not a taboo, I wouldn't say taboo, but it would be like, what, you can't make for a client meeting face to face. And whereas now it's a bit more acceptable. So do you think it has made us more open to different ideas and new ways of thinking? And perhaps the team members who came into that meeting as well, but has the way of looking at things changed within the industry?
It definitely has. Unquestionably, certainly in my experience, it has done. I think people are, we all know, don't we? Let's face it, we all know a lot of people that went through some very, very difficult times during COVID. Despite having got COVID 3 times during the pandemic, and my family also, we weren't badly affected, truthfully, and it wasn't a particularly a disaster for us as a family. But we did unfortunately see lots of very bad ramifications, including my wife's best friend, who's got long COVID and really very, very sick lady, and she's got a young family, and it's very, very tough to see. So I think it's made us all, in having seen the images on the television at night, having sort of clapped our saucepans for the NHS in the evenings, and seen all of us have got a story about a friend that has been, or a relation that suffered or indeed died. Elderly friends of ours have passed away with COVID, has made us all be much more empathy, much more sympathy. So where that translates to me on the Zoom meetings or the face-to-face meetings is we're now asking questions of each other. How are you? With meaning. We're asking what are you, where are you going to on holiday? We're asking how are you feeling? And then it goes on to, how are you mentally? The questions that you would never, if someone asked me how are you feeling mentally as a client a few years ago, I'd have said, well, why are you being so impertinent? That's really rude. My personal life, But now we feel very sort of able to undress mentally in front of each other and be very open about our feelings and what's going on. So I think that's definitely helped business, and the construction industry has been very good about that. I think we have, and of course, as we will come on to no doubt later, is the landlord and tenant community have been forced to collaborate, forced to come together because of the pandemic and the problems that caused with government enforced lockdowns, etc. So yes, I think it's definitely a much more open and friendly place to work in our industry than it was.
Just touching on what you said about the landlord and tenant relationship as well, because that was tested big time, wasn't it, during COVID? And then coming out on the other side, what changes do you see in the real estate industry, especially related to retail? I mean, during COVID, I heard people diehard retail and construction and so on. And when someone says, oh, there's not going to be a high street anymore. No one is going to go to high street. And now we have players like Amazon wanting to open stores. So it's I guess what I heard somewhere, and I can't remember it correctly, but is the polarity is never good, is it? You don't want to be extremely online, and you want to have an online presence. You don't want to be extremely high street either. Is that what you're noticing, or how has it changed the landscape of real estate, as it were, and the use of what you're seeing as the end user?
Well, the change, Gary, is absolutely profound. I mean, I've been doing retail property for 35 years, and I've never seen change so rapidly as we have because of the pandemic. Mainly positive, I would say, bizarrely, for the industry. It accelerated all our problems. The issues and the dying brands, in truth, have died, and they've died quicker because of COVID has accelerated that. So you've now got, bizarrely and ironically, a playing field of tenants that are in the retail market that are quite robust. I don't think you'll see many receiverships for some years to come in high profile in retail, because all of the wheat from the chaff has been sort of resolved. The weak retailers have restructured, have got into administration, have CBA'd. So who remains in the pool that you're fishing in is actually a very strong a strong bunch. Where it's led the landlord and tenant relationship to, I would say half of my business, Gary, is representing landlords and in shopping centres and high streets and regenerations and city centres, and half of them is for the brands. I think the tenants, for the most part, were extremely courteous and polite and very helpful through for the most part. There obviously were exceptions during the process, and all they were asking for is, during the government enforced lockdown period, we want to share our rent 50-50 with you, Mr. Landlord. We couldn't open our stores for trade. It's unfair that we don't pay any rent, but I don't want to pay the full rent because that's not fair. Sadly, I have to say, if the landlords had immediately taken that stance, then we would have had this amazing 3 years of bringing landlords and tenants together for the first time in my professional lifetime. I would say, disappointingly, the majority of landlords either didn't do that at all, didn't find a way of finding a balance of resolving it on an equal 50-50 sharing the pain of COVID basis, or some of them that did were ultimately too late in committing to that process. So they caused pain for 2 years by being in denial, trying to get full rent, litigating, until the government intervened with the moratorium. So I think the landlord community, unfortunately, didn't come out of it particularly strongly. There obviously were a number of the larger landlords that were excellent and exemplary, the Crown Estate being one that springs to mind. But I think so. There was definitely a collaboration required. I'm just hoping now that we've come out of it. I'm very much hoping the landlord and tenant community, a bit like we had that discussion a minute ago about mental health, I'm hoping that they'll both remember. I love the expression, we'll all be remembered by our actions at this time. And I'm just hoping that they will all sort of realize that we've got through this together as a team. We need each other to survive. Let's hope we can have a sort of very collaborative approach going forward.
A more symbiotic relationship rather than a parasitic.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite an I mean, the other word that sprung to my mind was a sustainable relationship, which would help both the parties going forward as well, isn't it?
It really would, because they both need each other so badly, and they probably now the tenant demand is a little bit less because of people going by the wayside. So landlords need occupiers more than ever, whether it be offices, industrial, or retail. You need, or residential. You need to have your tenants. So what's the point in being a very aggressive landlord and falling out with your occupiers? You've got to work together in a symbiotic way. And then the final point, sorry, I forgot to mention, Gary, because you touched on it earlier, is what I'm seeing as a trend, which I think is the original question you asked, is a move back to brick and mortar retail in a major way. More than, I think it shocked the government, I think it shocked the industry. We're now up to a level of 2019 sales plus. So we're now actually doing better than we were pre-COVID in most retail locations. And that's actually with footfall still, especially in London, still down on 2019. But the average transaction value, the ATVs as we call it, are up. And that's because people are fed up buying product from their bedrooms. You see today, unfortunately, and yesterday, the disastrous share price collapse of ASOS, Boohoo, unfortunately, and the Hut Group, etc., to name but a few. And that's because people are, the returns policy is one of the reasons for that. But one of the main reasons is people are, if you've been, in inverted commas, as my son would say, a sado, buying stuff in your bedroom for 3 years, and you're now been allowed out into the fresh air, why wouldn't you try and sort of enjoy brick and mortar retail shopping and shopping centres and entertainment and competitive socialising? Why wouldn't you enjoy that more now than ever?
Yeah, it's the social element as well, isn't it? It goes all.
Exactly. It's all social. It's all about to make you feel happier. And so people, I think, are really wanting to drive themselves into, rather than seeing shopping as an experience that they had to do to go and buy a frock or a jacket or a pair of underwear. Now they're going in there to really sort of enjoy themselves and interact with their friends. And they're seeing it as a lot more of an enjoyable experience than it perhaps was pre-pandemic. So as you say, the future has got to be an omnichannel world of online wholesale distribution, metaverse, and I think that will be a big piece of retail going forward. But also the brick and mortar is definitely here to stay, and arguably is even more important now than it was before the pandemic.
It's the touch and feel. I guess one question that comes to my mind, Scott, is did you always want to build your own business?
Yes, I thought that I was slightly unemployable. Having qualified and done the estate management degree I mentioned earlier at South Bank, I then went to join quite a lot of 2 or 3 large firms. So I was at Richard Ellis, which is the precursor to where I am now, rather ironically. CBRE. I was at Conrad Riplat. I worked as a developer with Gerald Ronson at the Heron Corporation. So I tried lots of larger firms, and I spotted pretty early on that I was a little bit of a, I'd like to say, a maverick or an entrepreneur.
Done. In the true sense.
I was actually pulling back from saying maverick for that Top Gun reason that I'd having watched the movie just the other day. But I definitely recognized that I was an entrepreneur. I don't think that I belonged at that time in a corporate environment. I wanted to invent. I wanted to try and find new ways of learning, new ways of teaching, and to try new skill sets. So I found that more difficult in a claustrophobic a corporate environment. I wanted to run my own business one day, is what I was thinking at that early stage.
And what make you, because there are a lot of people who ask me, having made the jump from corporate to the M&A and then to business ownership. So what made you take that leap of faith?
Everything in life, Gary, comes down for me to a movie, Sliding Doors. And it was a sliding doors moment for everything. The bit I didn't dwell on a second ago was that when I went to that university in South Bank Poly, I failed. And I want anyone to sort of that's watching this podcast to think that you have to be a straight A student. You don't. I got 34% in my first year. I resat the degree, and bear in mind it is the easiest degree supposedly on the planet. I resat the second year and got 32%. It was never been done before. Nobody's ever actually done worse in a resit year. So I therefore had to do night classes and continue those studies because the university wouldn't have me anymore. It's now a university. South Bank have turned into from a college to a university. So I got a job through a leg up from my father. He made a recommendation to, he knew through in the engineering world, he knew a developer with Gerald Ronson and Irvine Sellar. So they took me on as an office boy, as a tea boy, to go and do delivery, not to do any property work, but just to do deliveries and make the tea and get his Benson Hedges cigarettes at lunchtime. And so I did that for a little while, but that gave me a chance to, they gave me a chance to sort of do in between my duties as a delivery boy. I was allowed to do development appraisals and discounted cash flows, and learnt the sort of the world of real estate really in my spare time. To be honest, I didn't have a desk or a chair. I had to work in the boardroom when it wasn't being used in their offices, and so that's how it all really sort of started. And I went from there to Conrad Rickman.
Sorry. You did hot desking 35 years ago.
I did. Well, it wasn't so much hot desking. There was no prospect of giving me a desk. I wasn't being treated seriously as a permanent employee. It was I'd like to think it was an early form of hot desking, but it was just the fact that they had a pretty disparaging view of a young man that was just on the way up the ladder. But I think the sliding doors moment came when I went to a firm just after Richard Ellis, Conrad Rickman, Richard Ellis, and then I was made redundant, Gary, in a business because of when the recession hit in the, if you remember, the late 80s, 88, 89, 1990. They cut out, and retail was pretty badly affected, so they cut me out. And in truth, that was the sliding doors moment, because would I have had the chutzpah to go and set my own, that sort of Yiddish word for the talent or the drive to do my own business? If I'm being very honest, Gary, I'm not sure to this day whether I would have set my own firm up had I not been given that kick through redundancy. I felt that I had been in different companies. I'd tried medium, small, and large firms. I'd learnt my way. I was then laid off, and do I try and find a way back in when the market was going to improve into the corporate world, or do I think that let's be an entrepreneur, let's go and set one's own firm up? And I did in 1992, and that February the 2nd, with one other guy. We couldn't afford a full-time secretary, so we had a lady that worked with us 1 day a week and then 2 days a week. We're based in Albemarle Street, and it was a leap of faith, but I really didn't have, if I'm being truthful, a lot of options. So the reason we're telling the story is, anyone watching that has any interest in this, please don't think out of adversity. When I was at my lowest ebb comes opportunity, and you can survive.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, isn't it? Because sometimes you're in the deepest dungeons thinking, why me? And why am I here, kind of thing. And the next thing you know, that you have an opportunity which probably was not given to anyone else, and you just have to work hard and stick through it, isn't it?
Exactly.
Did you have a plan that you're going to sell the business, or
No, not at all. The plan was, my father again gave me some wonderful advice at the time. He said that really, and it's so true, really, what we do as an industry isn't technically rocket science. So you just have to work harder than your boss. This is something that I sort of have felt my mantra all my life. And sadly, I failed to pass this on to most of my staff over the years. We employed 50 people at CWM in the end, and we employ thousands here at CBRE, and 2,200 in fact are in the London office here. And I think that those days have gone, but really the industry that we're in, the more work you put in, the longer hours, the more financial benefits there are. Now, that doesn't apply to every industry. I'm not saying this is something in our podcast that applies to every single area, because that's simply not true. But certainly in real estate, if you are prepared to work all hours God sends, then you will eventually get spotted as being a hardworking, committed young woman and young man, and you'll get the rewards and the promotions accordingly. And that's what I did from an early stage. I thought I'm going to work harder than anybody else, and I'm going to put more hours in. And I was a single man, and it allowed me I didn't have family to worry about at that time. So I worked very, very hard. And because it's not rocket science, I got some traction and a bit of luck, a lot of luck along the way. But as Gary Player always says, the famous golfer, the more practice you put in, the luckier you get.
Yes.
And that's definitely what happened to me. If I worked hard, I got luckier somehow.
There is a coincidence there.
There definitely is a correlation.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, Scott, which comes to my mind is with regards to building a business, and specifically in the real estate world, relationships play a big part. I mean, that kind of links back to the team element, but also what you have learned from your career and way back when you were in school as well. I mean, and one of the things I remember always about working with you is how great you are with maintaining relationships, even with the most difficult people we both know, and how you manage the temperament of difficult clients, meeting the expectations, managing teams. How have you developed that, and what's the secret sauce here?
Well, it's a very good question. I think that for me, it is not what you think, Gary. I wouldn't say I'm particularly talented at that in every single area. This brings me back again to Shirin. So I felt early on I was good at business winning, and I was good at networking into the right connections to win those mandates. And I suddenly realized pretty soon thereafter, I'm the one responsible for keeping those relationships going. Now, even though there might be difficult, I like to see the good in everybody, and even the most tricky clients have got some wonderful sides to them. But I sense commercially, and perhaps this is my Glasgow Scottish background, I sense that if the most important thing was for me to win that piece of business, win that mandate, and then to keep that client happy for as long as I possibly could. Now, for me, it wasn't possible, I didn't think, to then keep my own staff equally as happy as I was my clients, if that makes sense. I just felt that my priority was always going to be the clients, to keep those men and women happy and to constantly give them the service. And therefore, there was going to be a weak spot with me being unable to bring to the fore young women and young men in my office. I wasn't going to give them the time, enough EQ. So that's when I sort of made the best career decision of my life in bringing in Shirin to compensate. So she, not to say that she wasn't great at winning business too, but her core skill was very much keeping everybody happy. So it was a great duo. So I was basically sort of winning the business and freed me up to go and network as much as possible, while she was sorting out all of the people and making sure everyone was happy and bringing them around. So that was that combined skills was definitely my sort of success story from that early stage.
Which is quite a beautiful way of putting it. Was more like inward, outward looking, isn't it? It doesn't make you less caring about the team, but the business needed that, so you had to focus on the outward part of it. And Shireen's core ability, as you said, was more inward looking and providing the team with the support which is needed as well to give that level of delivery to the clients. So
you only have so many hours in the day, Gary, and I actually sort of, if I'm being honest, and I would be, if anything slightly upsets me to this day after all these years, and you can see from my grey hair how many years I've been in this industry. People will say, a lot of people that have worked for me over the years will say, well, Scott didn't really get involved in that much. Not that he's a bad man manager, he just isn't a man manager. We never really had him. Now, I think that's a little bit unfair on me personally, because I recognize that my skill set for the benefit of that member of staff and for the whole company was client facing and winning business and implementing client advice rather than just winning it. I was obviously doing the transactions too, and therefore there's only enough hours in the day. I couldn't find 40% or thereabout of my working week to keep everybody warm and cuddly and happy and having coffees with them all. And I can now, as chairman, I can now do this, and I'm making up for it with gusto. I'm having coffees and cuddles with everybody all the time and giving them as much as I can of my support and mentoring. But I just didn't have on the way up that ladder, I didn't have the time to provide that. But I found someone that could.
which is what that matters really, isn't it? Because then they are focused on it as well, rather than doing a half-hearted job. But if you are strapped for time, and then if you then don't focus on the outward looking part and the business falls apart, you might be giving hugs, but that doesn't still work, does it? You want to pay the bill as well. So it's one of those things. How is a sustainability seen in the industry right now from the landlord tenant perspective, even for building the business, and how important has it been?
Absolutely vital, Gary. We won probably the biggest mandate of my professional career about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and from Land Securities to handle all of their retail real estate portfolio. It's now public knowledge, so I'm not betraying any confidences. And very, very critically, as part of that presentation, and on the front page, not the back page, of what they call the RFP, the brief that you get to pitch on, the front page was all about sustainability. Now, the benefit of CBRE, as opposed to CWM, my company that we sold and merged with CBRE 4 months ago, I didn't have any sustainability credentials whatsoever. Clearly, I was very cognizant of the issues, but I didn't have a team, and therefore, if there became an instruction, which I think will be the case of every instruction right now that we try to win, you need to employ sustainability experts. Now, as it happens, we have a team here of 48 people on sustainability. It is one of our biggest divisions, and led by a lovely lady who actually, funny enough, was ex-Land Securities, Kayla Fenn-Smith, who came with me to the presentation. Now, sustainability wasn't a little bit of an add-on to that presentation. It was the most important thing we dealt with in that pitch. And I think that there was lots of other companies that pitched too. We obviously won it, so we did something right. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that it is so front of mind, and it has to be. If you don't deal with sustainability above all other subjects right now in construction, then there is something fundamentally wrong with your business policy, and you won't win as an advisor. You won't win much work if you don't have that at the forefront of everyone's mind.
Someone who has been banging the drum for about a decade, it's quite nice to see that it's on the forefront of everyone's mind right now, because I guess I was banging that drum 10 years ago too soon, and then you come out looking like, what is she talking about sometimes? But one of the things which it just shouts out to me also is the part which you mentioned with regards to sustainability was that it's the forefront. Did CBRE ask you when you were going through the merger for the sale? Because I'm just trying to link, if someone is looking for building a business and selling the business, are you saying going forward that should be a core part of what they should deliver to make it more sellable, as it were?
Yeah, I think not so much sellable, because clearly we managed to successfully sell our businesses without any expertise in that area at all. But I think what we were good at, we were aware of the missing sort of piece that almost made us in some ways attractive to CBRE, because we were better than CBRE at travel retail, at outlets, at London villages, regeneration, consultancy advice on road mapping, retail brands throughout Europe. We had, even though we were a smaller business in comparison, we had lots of greater skill set, but we didn't have any sustainability talent whatsoever, amongst a few other pieces, but particularly sustainability. So they recognized that it was almost attractive to think, you know what, there's 2 and 2 could make 5 here. We can put the two businesses together. We can give Scott and his team what they need. We've got that skill set, and of course, very fortunately, within a month, it worked with the biggest mandate we've ever won in my career. So I wouldn't say that businesses that are thinking about selling have to provide sustainability expertise. However, if I was to start CWM again, I would definitely recruit women and men who have an understanding of that part of the industry. You know, it's clearly you don't. There is definitely an issue amongst middle-aged, if I may say, men who have not got a sustainability sort of front of mind mindset. And I think what's going to happen now, if I was to do the whole business again, I would be employing people that would all have that sort of talent or that skill set as part of their armory.
Which is, yeah, it's also one of the most interesting parts I see is small businesses. It is challenging to kind of, if you look at ESG, you do a lot of environmental stuff in small businesses normally, because people know how to recycle, because every penny counts in a way. And so I feel like environmental part of it is there. Social part is most of the times there, because you're small. When you're small, you do a lot with the community and you're closer to your client and stuff. Is the governance part, which I feel like it kind of can be challenging where you need, as you mentioned, that you didn't have anyone in the team to help you. So that becomes pretty much like a challenge, isn't it, for the SME in the sense of ESG and following a strategy there. So that is something I see as a.
It does, Gary. I think where I'm sensing though, which is maybe I'm being a little bit controversial here, but I don't think that that businesses should just employ ESG and sustainability expertise within their organization. We all have to have that skill set in ourselves. So it can't be just, I'm going to bring in Jeff or Angela, who are very good at that sort of thing. We all now need to take responsibility. We're all in this together. We all need to save the planet. We've got to sort of work collaboratively. And anyone that is unable to have a sort of sensible conversation about the subject, or to be able to put it in their reports or in their advice to clients, it will no longer be acceptable. I've got a man for that. I'll bring him into you can't do that anymore. What about you, Scott? What about you, Gary? You've got to have that sort of expertise. So I think this is part of our, the new world, is that we have to learn these new skills, whether we like it or not. And we should like it, because it is bloody important to our children and our children's children. It's
leave them a better world than we found it in, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Scott, I mean, on this very note, I feel like we are coming to the end of the discussion we are having, but I have one last question, if I may. If you were asked what was the biggest risk you have taken and what did you learn from it, what would that be?
Never, ever, ever be scared of failure. That is the key thing, as I described earlier with my university career and the setting my own business. But even since then, Gary, I've taken risks, not massively huge financial risks, but taken significant career risks and business risks all my life. And never, ever be scared of failure. If you don't take risks in life, in business life, then you will never, ever be a huge success, and you'll never learn. Because most of the risks that I took, most of them were a disaster, but I learned from them all. And therefore, I became a much, much better businessman later on in my career than I would otherwise have been if I hadn't taken those mistaken risks. So I would say that's my one biggest takeaway in entrepreneurial life, is take those risks and don't be scared if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then you've learned from it. It's been a risk worth taking.
Yeah, it's one of the things which I have to constantly remind myself before I feel like I'm out of depth, and then I'm like, should I be doing this? Because I don't have enough experience, or, this monster comes in your head sometimes. And then I have to remind myself, this is where the growth happens, doesn't it?
It does, but shooting for the stars. But even if it doesn't result in growth, though, Gary, that's my main point, is that it doesn't matter. The fact that you've taken that risk and it's failed isn't a disaster. You might think at the time when it failed, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. How stupid was I? But it will, in the grand scheme of things, you'll see when the whole jigsaw pieces together in 5 or 10 years' time, you'll realize that risk that you made the mistake in taking has helped you achieve an enormous goal later on.
Yeah, what a beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Scott.
Pleasure.